10 beginner tips for Oblivion Override. Whether you're a beginner or not, hopefully there's some new tips in here that maybe you didn't know about, or if you happen to know some ones that I don't cover, feel free to drop those in the comments so that the other beginners will see them. My first tip is to fully explore each map that you're on. This isn't just to get more money from killing enemies, or more experience so that you can do your evolutions, but most of the maps have some kind of quests or blueprints on it. There are also secret walls and hidden areas. Some of the chances to have these occur are unlocked later on as you play through the game. But for the most part, you don't want to just blow through a map, because once you get to the next one, you may be under on either cash or nanites so that you can evolve your skills. As far as I know, this game does not feature any speedrun rewards. So as of right now, I see no tangible benefit for skipping areas of the map. My next tip is to understand how your weapon and your mecha interacts with a guarded enemy. If you don't know, enemies that have this outline around them is an enemy with guard. Most basic monsters get their attacks interrupted if you hit them in any fashion, but an enemy with guard will not be interrupted unless you do a guard breaking attack. Some weapons have this built in. I'm showing a couple of examples here. Some weapons do not have this built in which case you need to think about if your mecha skill can do that guard break for you. Some mecha skills can't even do that at base value, but later on they'll unlock an evolution to do so. So if you really want to use a weapon with no guard break, consider evolving your mecha skill to do the guard break for you. My next tip, evolutions are a very important part of the game. Having all evolutions on the table at one time does dilute the pool a little bit. And once you get better at build making, you want to focus on specific ones. That being said, you can lock evolutions out once you get the ability to do so from Tristan. You may also have the option to block an evolution specialty from the actual mecha character select in the beginning of the game. I typically don't do this because I do enjoy seeing certain things pop up on specific runs, but you do have the option to block out stuff that you know for a fact you don't want to see. Also, weapons might have evolution traits tied to it as well. You can see that on the affixes of the weapon. For example, this monoglaive has armor reload level, which is one level of the shield tree. You don't need to invest any more points into shield, but if you do, it'll already be at level 1 by default, so you can actually go up to level 2 very easily. Speaking of evolutions, my next tip here goes into defending yourself in a run. Healing, shielding, and max HP are some of the strongest things you can take in this game. Max HP is basically my priority whenever it comes up. If I have the choice between healing or getting max HP, I usually go for max HP if I can. In regards to healing, you might see options that say HP regen. What this actually does is whenever you get an item that heals yourself, you will heal for extra depending on what that regen value is. For shielding, shielding will cap out at a certain percent of your life. Getting anything that expands the amount of shielding you can take can be very strong. The shielding tree by itself gives you shielding just for killing enemies, which is very strong. And then you can get shielding just for entering a battle arena. I typically like to have at least one defensive option. I wouldn't say one is more important over the other, but definitely grab one if you see it and then try to get it to at least rank 1 so you can get the benefit of the evolution. My next tip is to always grab the mecha evos if you can. You will find some really powerful basic evolutions, and every once in a while I have to skip these in order to get my mecha online. Every mecha has an ultimate too, and this is found when doing evolutions. So make sure you don't skip your ultimate, as I've had runs where I never even see it in the first place. Your ultimate is usually tied to your regular mecha skill anyway, so doing the evos on those helps you get your ultimate's power more easily. For example, in order to use the laser blaster, which is Crimson's ultimate, you have to land attacks with smashing fists. So anything that lets you get more hits on an enemy with smashing fists gets you more energy generation for laser blaster. My next tip is for bosses. No boss in the game can be guard broken. and this game does not have freeze or stun to stop the monster from doing anything. You really have to fight purely off game knowledge and respecting the attacks that these bosses do. It might be worth spending a little bit of time at the beginning of the fight just focusing on dodging and figuring out what kind of attacks they have. In this game, you will really need to learn how to jump. And I stress that if you cannot do a dodge against an enemy, it's probably because the game expects you to jump. Your dodge is also an 8-way directional dash, so don't always dash left and right. Sometimes you need to dash up, sometimes you need to dash diagonally, upward or downward. Also, some of the weapon skills in the game, the cooldown attack that's tied to your weapon, it may have iframes to it. For example, some attacks let you dash through an enemy, and those might have iframes. Some of the mecha skills may have iframes, or it's a counter attack. All of these are options that you need to be utilizing in the boss fights because they attack quite a bit, and remember, there's no health pots in this game, so you need to learn how to do the dodges. My next tip, and this one is for people who may have had a couple of hours in the game already and got some of your meta unlocked, but if you see these sisters right here, these robots are the most OP NPC in this game. The one on the left requires money in order to get items from it. The one on the right requires health to get things from it. And if you happen to get them both at the same time, you can try to utilize the health from the one and the money from the other to fuel both of them for the drops you want. A lot of times when you have nothing in the game, you can't fill this tank, which is your ultimate goal. However, if you skip these NPCs and try to leave some of the health packs that are on the map, and best yet, if you happen to land HP regen for healing, then the odds of you getting more value out of the sisters skyrockets. Any run where you can happen to break these two NPCs is probably a game-winning run. And my next tip is how to utilize your green nanite or your yellow amber. I'm not going to go into the SFTs. Those are for weapon unlocks. Just unlock whatever you can. That's the most fun. For green nanites, I personally do the left side first. I try not to max these out, but my priority is to reach emergency core, which is your death defiance of the game. From there, I'm putting points into blue. Blue is all about economy, but there's also some evolution stuff in here. It contains your catalog, it contains Tristan, and it contains some SFT stuff. At max level, you get to expand your evolution slots, which again makes you stronger and gives you more options in order to get through a run. The top tree is the last one. It gives your basic stats up like attack, crit damage, weapon skill cooldown. I think the most important part here is the weapon XP. Leveling up a weapon is a big part of being stronger in the game because it adds affixes to the weapon. So I would say if you're gonna put points in yellow, put them in precise cutting first. And eventually, you get Reborn, which gives you evolution refreshes. These aren't super required to beat the game, though they are nice to have. For the yellow currency, there's a lot of things that I would prioritize here. Number one being the ability to disintegrate a weapon. That gives you XP on the weapon you're currently using. The WB photo engrave chest gives you a free weapon on the map. Of course, the sisters we were talking about earlier is probably the number one priority in this list. I do believe it's a little expensive, but if you happen to have this available to you and you have the currency for it, you have to grab this. And then finally, weapon modification rooms allow you to change affixes on your weapon just before the boss fights. These are also pretty important because the affixes honestly give you a lot of damage or brand new tech for your weapon. So again, very important to grab these too. And then my final tip is that if you're dying on a certain mecha, don't get discouraged, but feel free to switch to a different mecha. I would say that some of these are easier than others. That's not to say that any of them are particularly bad, but in terms of getting your first wins in the game, you may find it easier to do that on some of the other characters. So my personal list from easiest to hardest would be Vic. Vic has invincibility on his ultimate and does a crap ton of damage. Lee has a lot of passive damage from daggers that get thrown out. So long as you have fast weapons, you get ambient damage around you. Aya has a very easy to use ultimate. You just latch on your tether, and as you have a tether on any number of enemies, you're gaining ultimate gauge. Thundario, while a very strong mecha, I feel like his skill doesn't really work very well until you level it up. His ultimate hits the whole screen though, so very easy to utilize. Then we have Crimson. Even though it's the default character of the game, I do find Crimson's smashing fist to be a little difficult to utilize until you get it maxed out. And then his ultimate only fires out one shot and powers you up for a little bit. The other characters are much easier to pull off. And then Kante, probably the hardest character in the game. This one has a Shoryuken counter attack. While very strong to be able to counter anything in the game, every time you miss it, you are losing HP. So I do like to consider this the hardest character to use. And there you have it, 10 beginner tips. If you enjoyed what you saw, I have several runs of this game already that you can see in these videos that are listed. If you want to see some more advanced tips, let me know, and I'll see if we can put together a new vid for that. Otherwise, thanks for viewing, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.